Alright, last one of the unit, Institutions of National Government, Unit 4, Video 23, Power of the Federal Courts. Alright, so what powers do they have? We know that they can rule stuff unconstitutional, that's called judicial review. They have the power to make policy. We know Congress can make policy by making laws. We know that the President can make policy by issuing executive orders, making executive agreements and treaties, and also signing laws. The court doesn't have any of those powers. So how do they make policy? Well, they make policy whenever they reinterpret or overrule laws. So when they, for instance, ban segregation in public schools, they just made policy. Or in Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court they said that you couldn't ban abortion. So abortion was legal in the United States. So that is them making policy. Even though they don't make laws, the fact that abortion is legal in the United States today is because of a Supreme Court case, not because of Congress, and not because of the President. And in American history, over 160 laws, federal laws, have been ruled unconstitutional. Remember, that might sound like a lot, but in the course of almost 230 years, that actually isn't very many. It's less than one per year. The Supreme Court also has the power to set precedents. Precedent, we know, is when somebody does something and then everybody follows it afterwards, not because they have to, but because they are merely following precedent. Usually the Supreme Court follows past precedents, so past decisions are usually followed. However, the court has overruled itself over 260 times, and you have a good example there. Plessy versus Ferguson instituted the doctrine of separate but equal. That was in 1896, and then in 1954, 58 years later, we have the Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board of Education, where it specifically overrules Plessy versus Ferguson. It said, "We conclude in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal." So the court can set a new precedent, and in that way, they are also making policy. Alright, going along with that same theme is the term here, stare decisis. Stare decisis, and that means to let the decision stand. That's the literal decision. Very simply, it means to follow precedent. The court very often follows this decision. So for instance, the court doesn't keep ruling on abortion every single year. They don't need to. They followed the principle of stare decisis. They're going to let Roe versus Wade. That decision is standing and has been standing for 40 plus years now. So they don't rule on that case over and over again. They just follow the precedent. They keep that past decision. The court can also impose remedies. A remedy, if you think about when somebody's sick, they might have a remedy to try to feel better. A remedy is a way to fix something. So it is how to correct a wrong. So in this case, you obviously have the angry crowd of people that don't want race mixing because apparently race mixing is communism. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. Who knew? Race mixing is communism. But the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, they ruled segregation in public schools is unconstitutional, and nothing happened. And so then in 1955, they heard Brown versus Board of Education Part 2. And in this case, the Supreme Court imposed a remedy. They said how to fix that problem. They said that the public schools must integrate with all deliberate speed. So they are imposing a remedy telling them how to do it. Alright, some checks on the judicial branch. We have formal and informal checks. Informal check is that their decisions can sometimes be ignored. So for instance, school prayer has been banned in public schools. Not allowed, teacher, coach isn't allowed to lead students in group prayer. That's what the Supreme Court has said. So something like what you see on the left, that's not allowed to happen anymore. What you see on the right quite possibly happens all over the country all the time. So people are ignoring the Supreme Court's decision, even though that technically is unconstitutional and not supposed to be allowed. The Supreme Court also has no police power, so they do not enforce their own decisions. They have to rely on others to enforce their decisions, so obviously that also limits their power because, again, their decisions could be ignored, potentially. And then finally, you have a list of congressional checks. So things Congress can do, they can impeach justices, Senate gets to confirm judicial nominees, they can change the number of judges, including Supreme Court justices, they can propose a constitutional amendment, They could pass a slightly altered version of a same law. So if the law gets ruled unconstitutional, Congress can change it a little bit and try again. And they can also change the jurisdiction of lower courts and the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So all of these are ways Congress can check the judicial branch. All right, see you guys in Unit 5. Deuces.